David, thanks for joining us on the podcast again today. So, at the end of each year, we like to recap what's gone on in the past year, talk about some interesting topics, important topics that are impacting Irish businesses and Irish industry, from a cybersecurity point of view. So, I think we'll kick off. Probably the most natural place is it was a big year for implementation regarding NIS2 and then DORA in January 25. So if you'd like to give us your thoughts, obviously there was a missed deadline with NIS2, but what does that mean for Ireland?
So with the two different legislations that have come out, or directives in terms of NIS2 and DORA, really what NIS2 is about is bolstering the EU cyber defence strategy. Because if you look at where Europe is based, it's in kind of between, the US and Russia, Eastern Europe. So what really it's about, it's making sure that all of the EU infrastructure, national infrastructure, is held to a high account in terms of cybersecurity. So the NIS2 directive is long needed. So I welcome it personally. I think it's going to be a big differentiator for European firms to be able to, ensure that their data and their intellectual property and how they engage with third parties is all going to be absolutely key going forward in terms of ensuring that the third parties are actually employing the same rigor around cybersecurity that the national infrastructure companies now have to do if they're essential or important entities. So it really is welcomed. DORA, in terms of operation resilience, really goes into business continuity on steroids. So it's looking at your key processes, your key applications, and how you would recover from those should they be taken out in some way, shape or form. So particularly around cybersecurity. And we're already seeing a lot of organizations are, in terms of that, are DORA compliant or going to be DORA compliant. They're asking their third parties what have they done in terms of their operational resilience and looking at their supply chain. So supply chain is a big key because you're only as strong as your weakest link. So in terms of that, I think it's really good. We're offering training now around NIS2 and DORA with the Fortified Institute, and that's an online version. We will also be holding some maybe in-person ones as well. For these are all CPD accredited. So sure. Just to ensure that the board, because it's after taking the responsibility from IT and bringing it up to board level. So again, it's another huge differentiator in terms of the ownership of cybersecurity.
Yeah, and I read this morning as well. It's the how you assign the roles as well within the organization. So do you have a CISO appointed? Do you have a DPO? And is the board of management, or are the board of management illustrating that they have knowledge of what's required from them as well?
Yeah, so training is another big part of the requirements of NIS2 and DORA, that the board is educated, but also your senior management team, because they can all be held accountable now and even stopped performing their managerial functions, named and shamed and fined. So it's a big stick, if you want, in order to get organizations to comply. However, there are carrots as well, which if you look at what Enterprise Ireland is doing in terms of, and the NCSC, the National Cybersecurity Centre, in terms of offering grants to helping companies, one, understand what the gaps are against NIS2 and DORA, but two, implementing the remediations as part of that. So there's 3,000 grant from Enterprise Ireland for EI clients, which is 80% funded, in order to get them to do an audit against the requirements of NIS2. And then you also have the NCSE offering up to €60,000 for the remediation work, which is massive. That's going to help an awful lot of organizations, increase their cybersecurity posture.
So you start with the cyber review, and then you progress on to phase two, which is the remediation. And what kind of stuff will be covered under remediation?
Well, a lot of it will be, say, the project management of implementing the remediations, the professional services, the software. Hardware is not covered
Okay.
underneath that. Um, but there are a couple of steps you need to go through when dealing with the NCSE, for example, because this is government money or public money. So they will want to see that there was a fair process in terms of three quotes or a tender process if it's over €50,000.
Yeah, yeah. Good. Something I wanted to talk to you about was vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities never go away. It seems like every week we've a new big vulnerability that's being exploited, whether it be from Microsoft or Fortinet or Palo Alto or someone like that. The big vendors seem to have quite a lot of vulnerabilities being exploited in the wild. Are we doing the simple things well? Do you think people are getting their heads around a patching program, an update program?
Well, each organization is different in terms of the level of maturity and their approach to doing patching. Yeah, look, I get it. It's painful, having to do your updates, every week, and sometimes it's nearly every day. But they're so important because this is what the attackers are exploiting. So doing your security patching is absolutely a must, particularly under NIS2 and DORA, as well as kind of looking for vulnerabilities that may be there. So managed vulnerability scanning service, or even doing your own vulnerability scanning. That's important. But my recommendation is use a third party to
Yeah.
do your managed vulnerability scanning, because they're the experts. That's what they do every day. Unless you've got security team handy enough that you're able to use, but that's really larger companies. So medium and smaller enterprises need to consider a kind of outsourced service.
And how often do you need to look for these vulnerabilities? So obviously you do your patching on a weekly basis. Is it a vulnerability scan then every 6 months, or a penetration test once a year? What is
Well,
it?
vulnerability scanning, do that once a month at least, but definitely do a pen test. Uh, at least once a year, preferably once a quarter. But this is budget constrained as well for a lot of organizations. And don't just tick the box. Adopt a cybersecurity plan and strategy around vulnerability management and patching and doing your testing, because just because you've ticked the box does not mean and done it well. Some organizations think a pen test is a vulnerability scan. It's not. So it's much more, because it's actually people looking to escalate privilege, inject SQL, so access management. It's all of these different things that differentiate a penetration test from a vulnerability scan. So again, I'd highly recommend that organizations do that. And in DORA, it's actually part of it that to do threat-led penetration testing, which is nearly a red team exercise. So so there's a lot in it, but understand where you are in your posture.
Yeah, absolutely. If there was one area that you would associate the year 2024 with, in terms of response, what would that be, David?
Well, incident response, we're actually seeing that a lot of our organizations are ill prepared for managing an incident and even documented a process and a policy around it. So we're seeing a big uptake in our incident response retainer service, where organizations are putting that in place. So we come in, we help them, define their plan, do some tabletop exercises around the different types of incidents they could have and how they're going to respond to it, identifying the key players within the organization, like the key stakeholders, who speaks to the media. So all the part of the crisis management, and actually doing scenario-based tests that you can respond to.
Yeah, I can imagine for organizations who haven't put that work in, where do they start? Obviously, it's panicked and it's a phone call and it's trying to get someone to help and then trying to find somebody that's going to work with your organization who knows your IT estate.
Yeah, well, we've had one incident such as that where we were talking about putting together an incident response plan, and in the meantime they got hit by a cyber attack. So there's a lot of lessons learned out of that. Can't really talk about it too much,
Sure.
but it just shows you that, you know, even with the best will, having a plan already thought out probably would have saved them, one, a lot of money, two, a lot of heartache, in terms of having an incident response plan already done,
Hmm.
completed, your tabletop exercises done,
Tested.
your
Yeah.
scenario-based testing done. So it really is, it lends a much more calmer effect when you're actually in the middle of a response.
Yeah, yeah, I get it. I get it. So the lesson there is be prepared.
Be
Got,
prepared, yeah.
yeah. Um, we can't I can't let you go anyway without talking about budget. Budget is always in the front of people's minds. Yes, people want to be protected and be prepared and everything else, but budget is always there. Are we seeing that now that there's too many tools, the budgets aren't being optimized, efficiency? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, again, like, it really, cybersecurity is like an onion. It's how much layers you want to put on it. And at the end of the day, it doesn't mean you're not going to be attacked. But what
Mhm.
you've got to do is actually make it unattractive for the would-be malicious actor to come in and hit you in the first place, and make it more difficult. So let them go after the easier, lower hanging fruit, as they say.
Mhm.
So, at least by looking at your own infrastructure, would say, well, look, how can we consolidate some of the tools that we have and more look at an enterprise-based solution that ticks all the boxes, gives you the security posture that you need. And maybe it's not point solutions. Maybe there's platforms out there, such as uh, CrowdStrike or Fortinet that have solutions that tick all the boxes right across the way.
Yeah, it could be eliminating a couple of tools and therefore saving budget along the way. And
Yeah.
then I think another a big trend I've seen this year is a move towards GRC platforms in terms of visibility and where you are, knowing your risks. And would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, a lot of organizations, particularly in the financial services sector, are using spreadsheets to
Mhm.
actually manage different legislative
Multiple
reporting requirements. And
frameworks,
it's
yeah.
multiple different frameworks that they have to report to central bank, Department of Justice, Law Society. So all of these requirements, have tried to gain access for very similar information to answer and respond to different legal requirements in terms of compliance can be quite difficult. So looking for a platform that kind of holds all that information in one place and can actually, click of a button, you can generate a report to satisfy your regulatory requirements.
Yeah, yeah, and give you visibility and everything else. Yeah. But you can't protect what you don't know.
This is
Okay.
true.
So we've seen a lot of talk about AI in cybersecurity. So I think, AI is kind of new enough, but we've had maybe a year and a half of AI now where it's come to the forefront, and it's accessible for everybody. In your mind, obviously there's two sides of the sword. There's the defenders and then there's the hackers. How is AI aiding each?
So, well, in terms of hackers and would-be malicious actors, they're using AI to improve their language skills as well by generative AI, using it to, write phishing emails, and effectively churning this out very, very easily then out to different organizations in the targeted campaigns. So in terms of the blue, the defense, so obviously hackers being red, attacking, the blue being the defense, yeah, you can use AI to, automate a lot of the actions that you need to take in terms of responding to threats, and phishing and other simulated email campaigns, like, you know, whale fishing and CEO fraud and all of those things. So AI has its uses, and yes, from the attacker's point of view, but also from a defense perspective. So it's here to stay. It's not going to go anywhere. If anything, it's only going to improve in its capability. So again, this is what organizations have to be mindful of. How are they going to respond to, what already is well invested in terms of criminal groups using AI to generate thousands of phishing simulated campaigns.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen it writing code as well for malware. It's another area, but it's particularly interesting, with the tools, the likes of your SIEM, your MDR, your EDR platforms, having AI there to respond to false positives and low level threats and stuff like that. I think it's a big help. I think it's making cybersecurity more accessible to a lot of IT managers and a lot of companies.
Yeah, but it's also used so the analysts focus in on what's actually constitutes a real threat. So automating some of your processes, and getting rid of some of those level 1 type alarms that are noisy and not much value. So looking at the value in terms of how a cybersecurity analyst can actually focus in on what's an actual attack, what's occurring. So again, it's very useful in that area.
Yeah, great, David. David, it's time, I think, to have a look at the top 10 cyber attacks of the year. So every year around this time, some media outlets put out their top 10 lists, and in this case, it's the InfoSec magazine, which is one of the top magazines in Europe. So this is only released today, actually. So it was very timely indeed. So just looking at some of these attacks. So started off at Loan Depot in America. Attack disrupts mortgage payments. So that was a big one. 16.6 million of its customers had their sensitive personal information stolen. So what looked like a ransomware attack. This is kind of typical of what we've seen over the last couple of years.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But if you look at most of these, and or also look at SolarWinds and other, Ticketmaster, Santander, all of these were as a result of third-party supply chain. So again, that's another reason why these directives have come out between NIS2 and DORA, and focusing in on the supply chain yet again, because that's the easiest way to get into a kind of, if you want to put it in terms of the whale, the bigger fish that's out there, and that's where they're going to attack, is that supply chain. And some of it's very, very clever in how they actually, engage in a ransomware attack of these different types of third parties. So it's right across. It's not sector specific either. It's right across health.
Yeah.
It's software. It's IT. It's security firms getting hit. So again, it's who are your key suppliers. Look at how they manage your data, what security controls they have in place, and what they're doing to ensure that their operation is resilient in terms of supplying your operation with resilience.
Yeah, seems to be a key trend there on the supply chain. Absolutely, and not only from a PPI or a data, from an operational point of view as well. I think we've seen it as well with the Microsoft CrowdStrike debacle, that it was an operational issue, and that you had to have a plan B in terms of, if okay, that's not available. Yeah, how are we going to get airplanes off the ground? I think it was the big case at the time. I think some of the airlines like Delta Airlines were affected. So it's an operational contingency plan as well.
Yeah, and look, at the moment, Dora is really focused in on financial institutions, but I can see that being the scope of that being increased to cover all organizations, and probably will form part of a NIS3. So And that scope will increase as well because it'll go down into SMEs as well. So everybody's impacted by that. If you even look at the third-party supplier questionnaires that are coming out now, it's all based around NIS2 and DORA, and maybe having something like ISO 27001, goes about 95% of the way to, dealing with all of those queries that come in. So having ISO 27001 in place will bolster your cybersecurity, definitely, but it also sends a statement out to your clients and to your partners, your staff, your customers, that we take cybersecurity seriously. So therefore, we're implementing to the highest information security standards, and that's ISO 27001 2022, the new release version,
standard,
which came out last year, but is only being audited and implemented this year.
Yeah, very
24.
good. We'll wrap up on this one, David. Right, I'll give you the scenario. You're now a seasoned CISO. You've just taken over the role in a large firm, and you're looking at 2025. Where would you start?
Well, understanding my security posture, that would be the first and foremost thing I would do, to see, well, where are my gaps? I'd also look at the organization and say, well, who's going to support me here in terms of the C-suite? I might be the CISO, but when it comes to the board and for compliance, and if we have to deal with a regulatory body, is that we marry up with compliance and say, right, how best can we serve the business in terms of getting the necessary resources and investment in to improve our cybersecurity? Because it's an ongoing investment, it's an ongoing process by constantly reviewing where you're at and making improvements to it. Again, that's what ISO 27001 does, is actually looks to see how you can make improvements to your cybersecurity posture and your information security management.
Very good, David. Well, David, thanks again for joining us, and we'll definitely see you in the new year.
Okay.